My ex-wife lost her mind when she heard $95 million and my name in the same sentence. Nobody told her that was just the opening offer. My name is Caleb Pruitt. I teach 8th grade English at Harmon Middle School for 11 years. I spend my summers lesson planning and reading on my porch, trying not to think too hard about my bank account. I made peace with it a long time ago. Her name was Melissa. Melissa Pruitt, for 4 years. Melissa Cook, before that and after. We met at a friend's cookout, late summer. She was funny, sharp, laughed at the right things. I was 30, she was 28, and I thought, finally this. I should have paid attention to certain things earlier. The way she talked about money, not having it, specifically. The weight she put on the word comfortable. The little comparisons she'd make a colleague's car, somebody's vacation photos, a ring she saw online that she sent me a screenshot of without context. I filed those things under aspirational and kept going, kept working. When Melissa started working in real estate in the Raleigh area, and suddenly she was moving in circles where what I made looked small. I booked a trip to Cancun on a credit card I didn't have room on. She'd mentioned it twice, so I made it happen. Spent 4 months paying it off after. I bought her a bracelet from a jeweler in Raleigh. The guy behind the counter asked my budget, and I told him, and he nodded carefully and showed me the case on the left instead of the right. She wore it twice. I was chasing something that kept moving. I just didn't know it was moving towards someone specific. His name was Trent Beausoleil. He was in commercial real estate, drove a Porsche Cayenne, wore a watch that cost more than I made in a year. I found that out later and had some kind of exclusive membership to a club in Raleigh that Melissa mentioned 3 times in 2 weeks before I understood what she was actually telling me. I couldn't compete with that. She filed quickly and eagerly. I just signed the papers. She was gone by spring. I went through a bad year. I won't dress it up. I taught my classes, did my job, came home, drank and repeat. I lost about 15 pounds without trying. My friend Phil sat with me one night in April and told me I needed to start reconnecting with people. Not dating apps, not anything forced, just people. Call somebody you haven't talked to in a while. I said who. He shrugged, said, anybody. What about that girl you grew up with on the farm? The one you always talk about? Joanna something. Joanna Holt. I hadn't thought about Joanna Holt in years. Genuinely, years. We'd grown up about 2 miles apart out in the county. Her family had a farm, big spread of land that had been in the Holt name since her great-grandfather. We were in the same class from 2nd grade through high school. Best friends for a long stretch of it. The kind of easy, comfortable friendship that country kids have when they're neighbors by rural standards. I remembered her as she was at 12, at 15, at 17. Tall, quiet, funny, in a dry way that snuck up on you. Her family was not wealthy. Working farm, hard winters. Her daddy Earl was the most no-nonsense human being I have ever encountered in my life. Good man. The kind of man who shook your hand and looked you directly in the eye, and you understood immediately whether you'd passed or failed some invisible test. We'd lost touch after I went to UNC Chapel Hill, and she'd gone a different direction. Christmas cards for a few years, then not even that. I looked her up, found her on LinkedIn of all places. The title under her name said, Founder and Creative Director, Holt & Co., New York, NY. I clicked on the company. Fashion. A boutique label. Women's wear. Based in Soho. The website was clean and serious, and the clothes were the kind that showed up in magazines I couldn't name, but recognized as expensive. I sat back and thought, I sent a message. Just, hey, it's Caleb Pruitt. Hope you're well. Heard you've done incredible things. Low stakes. No agenda. She replied in 40 minutes. Caleb Pruitt. Lord, how are you? Call me. We talked for 2 hours that first night, then 4 nights later for another hour and a half. She had the same voice I remembered, same dry humor, same way of letting silence sit without filling it. She asked about my teaching and was genuinely interested, asking specific questions. I asked about the fashion business, and she talked about it the way someone talks about something they built themselves, knowing every corner of it. I asked about the farm. She laughed. She said, well, the farm got interesting. About 6 years ago, during routine work on the back acreage, they'd found oil. Not a little. A real deposit. Geological surveys, followed by the kind of phone calls that make your hands shake, followed by a partnership with an energy company whose name I recognized from news headlines. The Holt family, who had been getting by for 4 generations, had become quietly, without announcement, genuinely wealthy. Earl had handled it exactly the way you'd expect Earl Holt to handle it, carefully, with lawyers, without changing very much about how he lived. Joanna had taken her portion, combined it with what she'd been building for years in New York, and turned a small fashion label into something real. She came home to visit Earl in July. I drove out to the farm because Earl had been told I might come, and he'd apparently said, and I'm quoting Earl Holt, directly here, "Well, bring him then." I drove down that gravel road, and Earl was on the porch before I got out of the truck, and he shook my hand in that way he has, and looked me in the eye for a long moment and said, "You still teaching?" I said, "Yes, sir." He nodded. "Good. Sit down." That was the entire interview. Joanna came out a minute later with 2 glasses of sweet tea and sat in the other chair, and we talked for 3 hours on that porch, while Earl occasionally contributed a sentence or two and mostly rocked in silence, and I realized at some point that I was happy. Just, simply, happy. Not performing anything. Not stretching. Not doing math in my head. Before I left, Earl shook my hand again, held it a second, said, "You're a decent man, Caleb. Always were." Coming from Earl Holt, that was a full paragraph. We were somewhere around the 3rd or 4th time I'd driven out to visit when Joanna's mother, Gloria, who had the memory of a person who had been quietly keeping track of everything for 30 years, said over dinner, "You know these two were already married once." I looked up. Joanna looked up. Gloria was smiling. 4th grade. Out by the old oak. Joanna made Caleb a ring out of a piece of wire, and they did a whole ceremony. Made Caleb's little sister officiate. Joanna said, "Mama." Gloria said, "You made him promise. You said he had to mean it." He promised. I looked at Joanna. She was trying not to smile and losing. I said, "I have absolutely no memory of this." She said, "Neither do I, which means we did it so seriously we blocked it out." I said, "So technically." She said, "Don't." I said, "I'm just saying. Technically. Legally in the eyes of whatever 9-year-olds consider binding." She threw a dinner roll at me. Earl, from the end of the table, without looking up from his plate, said, "I was there." You cried, Caleb. The whole table went. Even Earl's mouth moved a little at the corner. We started dating properly after that. We were honest with each other. We argued once about something I don't even remember, and resolved it in the same evening. She showed me her store in Soho, and introduced me to her staff, and I stood there watching her move through that space, completely at home, completely herself, talking fabrics and production timelines and fall collections, and then afterward, she wanted to get hot dogs from a cart on the street, and she ate it leaning against a building in a coat that probably cost $4,000, and she looked exactly like the girl who used to steal apples off my mama's tree. I fell completely in love with her. Quietly. Completely. Now, the trip. Joanna had been tracking something in the business news, a mid-sized commercial real estate firm in Raleigh that was, as she put it, circling the drain. The company had overextended on several developments. The financing was structured badly, and the principals were looking to sell assets to cover positions. Her business advisors had flagged it as a potential acquisition, not the whole company, specific properties that could be repositioned. She asked if I wanted to come to the meeting. Said she liked having me in the room, and I kept her grounded. I took a personal day on a Friday and drove to Raleigh with her. The meeting was at a hotel conference room. Joanna's team was there, her attorney, her financial advisor, a real estate consultant. Across the table would be the principals of the firm in question and their representatives. We walked in. I looked across the table. I recognized the watch first, then the face. Trent Beausoleil was sitting 3 seats down, looking like a man who had spent considerable effort appearing comfortable and was failing. He'd aged in the years since I'd last seen him. Not badly, but anxiously. He recognized me about 4 seconds after I recognized him. And then the door opened again, and Melissa walked in. She was with him, apparently. There in some support capacity, or just along, I wasn't sure. She was scanning the room with the expression of someone who expects this to go well and is already composing the story she'll tell about it. Then she saw me. Then she saw Joanna. Then she looked at the nameplate on Joanna's folder, Holt and Company/Holt Family Holdings, and something moved across her face that was difficult to interpret and then became easier to interpret. She kept it together for maybe 8 minutes. The meeting opened, introductions were made. Joanna's team began going through the preliminary terms. Trent was nodding along with the practiced ease of a man who has sat in many rooms like this, and Melissa was beside him, being quiet, and I was sitting next to Joanna, being a normal human being. Then Melissa's eyes landed on me again, and didn't leave. I could feel it, the recalculation happening in real time. 8 minutes in, she leaned toward Trent and said something in his ear. He glanced at me, then at Joanna, then back at his papers. Then Melissa said, not quietly, not a sidebar, just out loud into the room. What are you doing here? The room paused. I said, I'm here with Joanna. As what? Joanna looked up from her folder with an expression of polite confusion, like someone had just said a word she didn't recognize. Melissa said, he's a school teacher. Why is a school teacher in this meeting? Joanna's attorney cleared his throat. Joanna put her pen down. I said, I'm here with Joanna. Again, because it was still true, and still answered the question. Melissa said, how much are you worth? Did you tell her how much you're worth? Because I was married to this man, and he, Trent, said her name. Sharp. She stopped. Then didn't stop. No, Trent. I'm serious. She needs to know. He doesn't have money. He has never had money. Whatever he's told you. Joanna said, pleasantly. He hasn't told me anything about money. Then how? Because I've known him since we were 7 years old. Still pleasant. I know exactly what kind of man he is. I've known longer than you've been in his life by about 20 years. She picked her pen back up. Should we continue? Melissa's mouth was open. Trent said her name again. Lower. A different register. The register of a man watching a deal move away from him. She calmed herself, but not for long, as soon as she heard $95 million budget to buy property, and my name in the deal. She pushed her chair back and stood up and pointed at me, and said I had hidden my wealth from her, that I had deliberately misled her about my financial situation, that I had assets I had never disclosed during the divorce, which, for the record, I did not. I was a public school teacher in Beaufort County, and my assets were a truck and a mortgage and a decent collection of paperback novels. It's a good thing that Joanna did not close out the actual budget, which was $130 million, because her father wanted to expand and branch out from oil to other venues. Imagine what she would have done if she had heard $130 million, but her current meltdown was no slouch either. She said I had emotionally abused her. That was why she'd left. Not Trent. Not the watch or the car or the membership. Abuse. She was pointing, and her voice was getting the kind of high, tight quality that means a person is no longer editing themselves. Trent stood up and told her to stop. She turned to Joanna, then moved around the table, actually physically moved toward her, and said that Joanna needed to understand she was being used, that this man was a liar and an abuser, and she had first-hand knowledge, and she was telling her as one woman to another. She let Melissa finish the sentence. Then Joanna said, Honey, I am not interested in knowing what he was to you, but I know what he is to me, and I think you might want to lower your voice before this becomes a different kind of problem. Melissa knocked a water glass, and the crash of it was enough that hotel staff appeared in the doorway. Melissa was still talking, cycling through versions of the same accusations, and Trent had fully detached from her at this point. He was looking at his papers with the expression of a man calculating how much this had just cost him. 2 hotel security people came in. Melissa told them to get away from her. At some point in it, Trent told her, in front of everyone and the officers, that they were done. Just like that. Flat. He said he couldn't do this, and they were done. She looked at him like she'd been hit. She was escorted out while Trent sat at a conference table, head down. Joanna said, I think we're going to pass on this one. Trent didn't argue, didn't say anything. He looked like the air had gone out of him entirely. The watch was still on his wrist. I noticed it again on the way out, catching the light. Still expensive. Still the same watch. It looked different now, though. Smaller somehow.